Welcome to today's conversation. My name is Lindsay Young, if you don't already know me. I'm the president of Aspens Media. We help businesses, primarily in distribution markets, tell their stories and share their expertise. First, just a little bit of housekeeping for those of you listening live. I guess I don't mind if your video is on, but please keep your audio off. That'll reduce any unexpected disruption. But we definitely still want to listen or hear from you. So if you have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat down below. I will either answer them as we get them, or we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. And for those listening in on our podcast, excuse me, Attract, Engage, Grow, or on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. So I'm just going to dive right in. We don't have a guest today. You've just got me. So I'm really excited to share some of our core beliefs, our core strategies with you today. So B2B buyers, as you guys all know, conduct more of their research online than ever before. So what are we doing about that? Your sellers have fewer opportunities to influence a sale, yet distributors continue to dedicate disproportionate resources to sales relative to their websites. So your website needs to work with your sales reps and your other customer-facing team members to help your customers make the right buying decisions. That means going far beyond just listing products and features. So just to be clear, what this isn't about is product content. We're not talking today about descriptions, lists, attributes, though of course that's a very important component of making your website a must-visit as part of the shopper's journey. This is more about the blogs and articles, the case studies, the guides, the other resources that can, if done well, support the buyer's journeys and your sales efforts. So and I did just want to pitch real quick. I am lining up a webinar guest for the first quarter who can speak to best practices, common mistakes, and so on with product content. So look for that. So let's start simply. Why? Why do you need to invest in the right content for your website? First, it's a must-have today, right? It used to differentiate, but I would argue it's now what your buyers have come to expect. Second, it's the best way, having great content, blogs, case studies, white papers, comparative, comparing products, application information is the best way to attract and then keep buyers and shoppers on your site. Something like 70% of a buyer's journey is over before they even reach out to a real person, and some never do. So if they come to your site on that research mission and they can't find the information they need to make a decision, or information that helps them be more confident in you as a supplier or as an expert, they're just going to go to another site. And chances are they're probably not going to come back to yours to make the purchase or to pick up the phone to call you. Speaking of, your offline expertise, which you all have, needs to be reflected on your website. So let's say your team are experts in selecting the right hose for the job. A mining operations looking for a hydraulic hose that will work in sub-freezing temperatures, right? And it's transporting some sort of hazardous substance, right? They know they need to get that right. And they need to reach out to Fred or George or Anne on your team to make that selection, because to do it wrong would be a really costly mistake. Or an engineer needs to spec out the right fastener for a product that's going to be used in a corrosive environment. So again, they know they need to reach out to your team, because you're well known for your knowledge, your expertise, your depth, and you are the ones they go to. But that said, they go to your website, someone goes to your website looking for that information, looking for an expert that can provide that support. And I'm going to attempt to share my screen. And hopefully this goes well and doesn't share the wrong thing. So, all right. And this is what they see, right? You have all that in-depth knowledge, and they see some version of this messaging. Pretty standard, not differentiated, not really a reflection of who you are and what you know. And for someone that's just getting introduced to a supplier, this is probably not going to make that distributor stand out. It's probably not going to answer any of the questions the searcher is looking to get answers to. They're going to probably find another website because that's easy to do, whether that's another distributor, or they're going to go straight to a manufacturer's website, which is very common. Or they might even just find a random forum or another site, to get direction from, right? Maybe not to pick the right hose, but maybe to get direction on where or who to go to for that, which is really too bad, because distributors have a great opportunity to build out a resource library that's wider and deeper and caters to the needs of their unique customer base that would be far more useful to an individual buyer than it can get anywhere else. I'm going to stop the share. All right. So how do you do this? How do you create content and information for your website that speaks to those buyers, that demonstrates that expertise, that builds the awareness that you are the place to go to for these answers? So we use a fancy phrase called content strategy. And content strategy is basically the process of building a plan to create and distribute valuable, relevant, and consistent content to attract and retain a clearly defined audience and drive profitable action. I'll say that again. To create and distribute valuable, relevant, and consistent content that attracts and retains a clearly defined audience and drives profitable action. I want to break that down a little bit. Valuable. When we say valuable, we don't mean showcasing how awesome you are. We're talking about valuable content for the customer. So this is educational content that's going to help them make the right decision for their business. Because again, some of these decisions these buyers are making are really important decisions, right? You need to be able to provide the right information that's catered specifically to what that person is looking for. Valuable to the customer, customer-centric, relevant. And when I say relevant, I don't just mean again, generally to the products that you're selling, relevant to the customer, their industry, their position, right? Everybody, we'll talk about this a little bit later. A safety director cares about things in a very different way than a procurement professional does, right? So their industry, their position, where they are in the buyer's journeys, there are a lot of things that you need to take into consideration when you're building out content for your website that can support those goals we were talking about. And consistent in tone and message and in frequency. We all know websites. I posted about this on my LinkedIn the other day. We all know websites that we visited where you can tell they had an eager person for maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years. They built a lot of great content out, and then now it's been blank, right? It's been stale, and the last byline date is in 2017 or something, right? So I think it's really important to build a plan that's doable and executable and is consistent over time. The thing is, I truly believe that distributors can do this at least as well, if not better, than some larger, more well-resourced competitors. So I think that distributors kind of underestimate themselves sometimes in their ability to execute on these ideas that I'm sharing today, especially if you're in a niche, if you're selling a specific kind of hose to a very specific kind of market in a very specific region. You can go far deeper and provide more specific resources than many of your larger competitors can. You have the subject matter expertise in-house or in your network. For example, your manufacturer partners have a depth of knowledge that you could tap into if they're willing to partner with you on this. So I'm going to go into a little bit more information, and then I'll take a break for questions. Let's kind of talk a little bit about building a resource library. I want to share why I use the term resource library. I feel like blog, for some reason, still has a dated reputation, a bad reputation. I don't know why, but in reality, all a blog is a library, right? It's a library of resources on a website, ideally organized in a way that makes it easy for your readers, i.e. prospects and customers, to find the information they're looking for. And thinking about it that way too is also, I believe, more customer-centric and more accurate. So what do I mean by content? Let's start there. What kind of content are you putting in your resource library? I'm going to attempt to share my screen again. All right, so I believe that worked. Content's a bit of a bland word, right? It's not great, but it is all encompassing. So, and of course, I'm open to other terms, but here's a whole slew of things. And of course, some of this is outside of what I would consider like a website's resource library, like the social media post, but it is part of a universe of content that you can create to support your buyer's journey. So the goal here, of course, is to put the resources a potential buyer might need in one place. So who produces them is less important as long as you've given thought to whether that resource is useful for the customer. And I'm definitely not advocating for throwing everything against the wall that you see here and hoping some of it sticks. Your library and your supporting content for your team needs to have a reason behind it. So I'm gonna share real quick a list of questions, and then we're gonna take a break because I think there's a few questions that are coming in. And why is this? All right, so let's start with the questions that you can ask to kind of figure out what content types and what content topics will work best for your customer base. So understanding the answers to these will really make a big difference. Again, relevant, valuable, and consistent. All right, what are your goals? What are your sales and marketing goals? You're looking for brand awareness, you're looking to showcase expertise, your personal touch, reduce sales cycle time, drive organic local traffic. And of course, your overall business goals. Let's say your business is looking to increase reach into the residential contractor market in 2024. Okay, well, that's really good information for a marketing team to have when they're building out a content strategy for their website. Who are you solving problems for? And this is really talking about the specific type of company that you're trying to reach. So let's say you're trying to reach the residential contract market in 2024. You want to expand your reach in that market in your local area. Okay, so what kind of residential contractor? Well, okay, let's talk about the residential contractor that does works on single family homes and it's custom, right? Which is a very different world and way of working than maybe the tract homes, right? Where you're building all of the same house in a very large area, right? So they all have slightly different needs. So be specific if you can, because it'll help you uncover pain points that might be unique and niche to that market. Third, who's making the buying decision? So for distributors, is it a procurement professional? Is it an engineer? Is it a plant manager? Is it a safety director? All of these people care about different things, and different content will appeal to different roles. And whether they're making the final decision, some of them may still be playing a role in the recommendation. So you still want to influence them and provide them with the content they need to support that buying process. You want to, of course, show them that you get it, that you get them, that you understand what they need. What themes or buckets? So the answer to this question really has to come from your value proposition, and then branches of that, related to all of the answers that we just came up with. For example, you make customers more efficient, or let's say safety is your bread and butter, or a core focus of everything you do. So you help customers go home to their families at night. We often work with customers, with our clients, to identify what their real value proposition is, what makes them different, where they want to grow, because that helps us determine what topics or categories to focus on when we're building out content. So what will have the most impact for their efforts? Content types. We're talking about articles, guides, videos, case studies. Again, you don't need to throw everything against the wall to see what sticks. Identify what's going to have the most impact, the low-hanging fruit, and then build from there. What tone do you want to put across in your content? Do you want to come across as super technical because your audience is filled with engineers? Are you looking to demystify the products in an effort to sound down to earth, meet the buyers where they are because they're not engineers? This is an important conversation to have. How are you going to distribute the content? When we're talking about distribution, we're not talking about just posting it to the website. We're talking about how are you going to, are you going to send it through email? Are you going to break it up into lots of social posts and do a campaign there? Are you going to enable your sales reps to easily share that content? Of course, posting it to your website is one way of distributing it, but it will only be effective if you optimize it for search so that people can find it through your search engines. How are you going to measure success? This is the last kind of piece. And of course, I'm not going to get super deep into measuring success because ROI is its own conversation in and of itself, but identifying metrics you can track to determine if what you're doing is supporting you is important. So a few examples: organic search traffic. What does that mean? Measuring the traffic, the people that come to your website from searches on Google and other search engines. Conversions, somebody signs up for a newsletter on your site, somebody requests a consultation for an equipment selection, somebody actually buys something on your website. Those are things you can track. But of course, a public service announcement: not every piece of content that you create is designed to sell. And you can't say that if a blog or a guide doesn't drive a lead or doesn't drive a sale directly, that it didn't work. That's not the role of a lot of this content. And as we know, chances are no one's probably going from an article directly to a purchase. So it's going to be really hard to track that. So you do have to align your metrics, and you have to have a good understanding that all of this, everything we're talking about, is a long game and it's cumulative. It's like a snowball. It's going to build speed and impact over time. So I'm going to stop that share real quick. And I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions, so I'm not just sitting here talking at you. It looks like Mike Marks of Indian River Consulting Group has a question. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Oh, you unmuted yourself. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Lindsay, but I'm probably going to inadvertently throw you under the bus here just for a second. but for anybody that's listening, you guys do all of our stuff. I mean, all the blogs and the website and all that. And frankly, you're talking about content strategy. I don't know what my content strategy is. And so I just thought, because it's the old story, get a guy, and you guys do it. I was excited when LinkedIn said I'm an influencer, and we had 7,000 views of the last blog you guys put up for me. But so what's my content strategy? I'm sorry. It's a real question.
That's okay. It's a great question. What is Mike Mark's content strategy? For those of you who don't know Mike, he's a very well-known and really well-respected consultant in the distribution industry. And we've been working with Mike since the beginning of Aspens Media, and we're really thankful for that relationship. So when it comes to, and I feel like this will apply to anybody, right? Not just consultants, but when it comes to consultants and people that do what Mike does, we're really talking about a slightly different game, right? Because you're talking about a longer sales cycle, maybe higher priced deliverables, right? Sometimes it's an ongoing relationship with your customers. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a big project, right? Those things are all true. But the key is that you're not going to write an article, and 95% of the time, someone's not going to necessarily read that article and be like, oh, I need to restructure my sales force. I should call Mike. Chances are someone's looking for information about that, or they're curious, or they have some pain points, or somebody shared that and it intrigued them, and they'll read it, and then they'll file away it in their brain. And then 6 months later, when they are like, oh, we really do need to think about how we can restructure our sales force and maybe think about where the sales comp come. These are all things that Mike does. I remember seeing a bunch of content, a bunch of articles that Mike shared and that my friends shared from Mike over the last 6 months. I'm going to reach out to them and have a conversation. So it's really about being visible and being part of the conversation. I think that's a big component of the strategy for you, Mike, is to not be part of that conversation is going to hurt your business. So using guest posts on industry websites, posting to your LinkedIn on a regular basis because you have a really big network, and sharing insights and tips, you know, based on your decades of experience in the industry, and just being there and being visible so that when someone does have a problem that you can help solve, or that you can help them find someone to solve, either way, they'll think of you. Because if you're not visible today, then no one's going to reach out. Does that help clarify kind of our approach for someone that does what you do?
It does. Well, and it's just like when you guys redid our blog, I mean, because we've got, you talked about library, and I when you guys redid the website, and I saw just, I don't even know how the scroll bar was really strong because you have it all in there, but it's all set up. So I suppose if somebody was searching for a problem, they could find it, right?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, Mike. You know, one of the things I mentioned, oh, someone's in our waiting room. We better let him in. One of the things I mentioned earlier was ideally when you are structuring your blog or your library on your website, you're not organizing it. I'm glad you brought this up. Or if you are organizing it by time, right? So the most recent blog is on top, and then
Right.
and you're not giving anyone any other way to kind of sort that content, then it's not very useful to the user, because most people are not just going to come to your website and be like, ooh, I mean, they might, but ideally someone's coming to your website or they're coming through search, right? And so on your blog, we kept it pretty simple, but at the top of your blog, we have options to filter the content by topic. So if someone's looking for content around sales compensation redesign, they can click sales compensation, or sales management, or strategy. So we make it a lot easier for them to find content around the topics they're looking for. And I think that's really important, to provide different ways that people can dig through your content. So.
Well, that's very helpful. I see, I'm looking at the other names. I see a number of my evil companions are here too. I got Scott Sending and Nick Bear as well. So, hey guys, I know I'm not supposed to say that, but I just wanted to. Happy holidays.
Thank you for your question, Mike. Does anybody else have any questions before we move on to the next part of my program today? It doesn't look like it. Remember, if you do have questions, I won't make you talk like I made Mike talk. Mike was willing to chat and ask those questions, but you can just throw them into the meeting chat. I'm pointing this way because that's where I see it on my screen. Just toss it in there, and then if I see it while I'm talking, I'll jump on it and answer. If not, we'll do a Q&A at the end. All right. Well, then let's go ahead and move forward. What I was going to do next is talk a little bit about, just share a really quick example of how we use the questions that I shared with a distributor. And again, this is not a real example. This is a made up example, and it's really light, but hopefully it gives you a better idea of how to apply them when you're trying to decide on content topics. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, because I have, all right, it's loading, and here we are. It seems to have worked. All right, so I don't actually think the stock photo I chose for this is perfect for the company that I'm going to tell you about. But we're just going to go with it. So let's say that you are a building products distributor, and you need to build out a content strategy for your website. These are pretty generic goals, but we're just going to go ahead and answer them anyway. So what are your goals? You just want more brand awareness. Now we're talking in this example, let's say that this distributor is targeting lumber dealers, lumber yards. For this specific content strategy. So what are your goals? Brand awareness. You want to be well known in that community. Cross-selling. Do you want to sell more products to that demographic, to lumber yards? You want to reduce the sales cycle time. You want to drive more traffic to your website. You want to become an indispensable partner, right? So I already said lumberyard. So, and you can get specific about that. But really what I wanted to provide the example around is who's making the buying decision at those lumberyards. Let's say it's a CFO or controller, someone in that holds kind of the purse strings, okay? What do they care about? Again, super high level, super light, but hopefully gives you a better idea of how to apply these questions. Okay, they care about doing more for less. They care about productivity, getting more done with fewer resources. They care about purchasing smarter, right? They care maybe about consolidating suppliers, okay? Now, but outside of the purchasing and the consolidating of suppliers, outside of that specific relationship with the distributor, they also have things they care about related to their own business, right? In addition to productivity. They want to grow their own businesses profitably. So when you're thinking about developing topics for your customers, you also want to think about, like, what do they really care about? It's not just about buying smarter or getting the best price or getting great service. What do they care about? Like what affects their ability to do their job in their own business, right? So they want to grow the business profitably. They want to sell more to their customers, right? They want to lower costs for their business. So there's a lot of topics. It's very rich for topics that you could write about to help them so you can become that indispensable partner, right? It's not just about selling to them, it's about enabling them to do their jobs better. And I'm sharing this because this is not the CFO of a lumberyard. This is a multitasking marketer, and this is a persona that we created for our own business through Aspens. And the only reason I'm sharing this right now is when you're thinking about who you're writing for, it can be helpful. You don't have to go crazy, but it can be helpful to build out kind of a fake persona that identifies, okay, what are their goals in their jobs? What are their challenges? What are their expectations? What do they get measured on? And then how can you help them with all of that? So I think it can be helpful when you're kind of framing out the answers to these questions. So if you have questions about that, we actually have some content on our website around personas. We have content on our website around all of this stuff. It's all free, it's all useful, it's all objective. I'd be happy to share or just visit our website at 3aspensmedia.com. All right, so questions to ask. What themes or buckets of content? So if we're talking about this controller, the person that holds the purse strings, we talked about what do they care about? So let's just dive into one thing that they care about: productivity, more for less, right? How can they lower the cost of their own purchasing? How can they reduce returns from their own customers? What are some best practices there? How can they, the lumberyards, not the distributor, balance just-in-time and safety stock? So as you can see, I'm going far beyond just how they buy and the price they're buying for. I'm talking about tips and tricks that are best practices for how they can run their own businesses better. So hopefully that's helpful, in terms of walking through how we would identify potential topics to write about for that audience. You want to be helpful, non-technical, because this is not somebody that's necessarily product smart. In terms of the specifics, and very accessible. And then, of course, distributing the content. And I'm reading this because we also post these webinars on podcasts, so they can't see the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and read this website. You want to also make sure that all of your content is search optimized if it's something that people are searching for online. Email marketing. Helpful email marketing, not just buy our product, but here's a great article that might help you run your business better kind of email marketing. Maybe you'd want to do webinars, how to maybe run your business better webinar for these types of companies. Distributing content via sales teams is really important. How are you going to enable them to use the content that you're creating easily, whether that's just a simple PDF or giving them email copy to use themselves, or social content that they can leverage and personalize for themselves? How are you helping your sales teams leverage that content? And I'm not going to go into it in this webinar, but how can you work with your sales team to create a lot of this content so that they're more excited about sharing it? Whole other topic. I know that can be a challenge, but it is doable, and we're doing it with some of the clients that we work with. And then, of course, social media. We already talked about measuring success. I'm not going to go deep into this now. But as I said, there's a lot of ways to measure success, and success doesn't always necessarily mean a sale, right? Success can also be more brand awareness, more engagement, people coming back to your webinars time after time. That means they're engaging with your brand, they're becoming loyal to your brand, they recognize you as an expert. voluntary subscribers to your educational newsletters. That can be a measure of success, right? Purchases, certainly you can track, increases of, average order value and all of those things as well. But when we're talking about content, it's always not always tied to the dollar. Okay, and then I wanted to kind of go through this. When you are building out a plan for content for your resource library, all like that whole slide that showed about 1 million different types of content, there you still need to take that content and align it, right, based on topic and type with the buyer's journey. So here's a few examples. Awareness, and of course I simplified it here, right? Awareness, consideration, decision, right? I realize that the B2B journey is not linear necessarily. Nobody's journey is linear. And there's a lot more complexities involved in each of these than, I'm showing here, but you get the gist of it, that, the importance is aligning that content with that stage. So awareness, they know there's a problem, they feel a pain, they're not quite to the point of knowing what the solution is. So can you be a trusted resource for that stage when they're just researching, or maybe they're Googling, something? Can you be okay with them coming to your site just to answer a question and leave again? This is what you would consider kind of the top of the funnel content. You're just building trust. You're just there for them if they need you. Consideration, right? They're actually evaluating options to solve that pain or problem. And then decision, they know what they want to do, so they moved on to choosing a vendor or choosing a product. And at this point, they may just pick up the phone and call you, right? A lot of research shows that distributors' customers really move between channels pretty frequently in their shopping and buying journey. So though we're looking to showcase your expertise online and improve that customer experience there, they still value that personal touch. So this is a stage at which they may call, your sales rep or your inside team, especially if it's a more technical purchase. They're not going to just rely on your online content to make especially more technical purchase. It may help move them forward and give them the information they need, but chances are they're going to call and still want to do a consultation to make sure they're making the right purchase in the right amounts at the right price. You know the drill. So you can see here, again, I'm going to go ahead and read these for those listening on the podcast. Awareness, examples of content that would align with that stage, educational articles, a series of social posts, guest posts in industry publications. So for Mike, for example, and this can, distributors, manufacturers, anyone can write articles that can be placed in publications that, trade publications that reach their audience, right? Mike writes a lot for a lot of industry publications, for example, like MDM and DSG and all of the industrial distribution, etc. The goal here is to generate awareness of a problem, of a pain point, of you as the expert, as someone who knows about that and how to solve it. Okay, so educational articles, social posts, publications, maybe more general guides. Consideration, this is when you're looking at case studies. How have other companies like mine solved this problem? How has this company worked with companies like mine? And what were the results to solve this problem? Are they worth talking to? Use cases, I kind of break that out separately because, we've developed use cases for manufacturers, for example, and distributors around how to use X product, or how companies in X industry are using X product, right? How the medical industry is using this specific tool to improve their machining processes, because that's going to be very different from like maybe a oil and gas operation. Application advice, how to use X in X, that could also fall under awareness. Guides that are more specific to products or brands, videos and webinars, showcasing different products. This is when you're getting more product specific. Decision, demos, comparison blogs, like that would be like X product, like a sandpaper, 2 different kinds of sandpaper, from 3M, like which one is best for the job. That's what a comparison blog would be. And facts. I am a fan of facts. Frequently asked questions, pages with frequently asked questions, but I generally prefer them to be very, very specific. For example, facts around selecting the right sandpaper for your job. I know that's a very specific note, and not like facts about my company. I prefer to, maybe it's facts around how we do business, like here's the customer service, like very like logical, practical questions. But if we're going to do facts around products, it needs to be very specific, because you don't want your customer to have to filter through to find what they're looking for there. You need the whole thing to be focused on the topic that they're interested in. All right. So a few tips that we find have worked really well. I'm going to go ahead and go off screen here. And if you guys have any questions, remember you can just throw it in the chat. Happy to chat, happy to answer some, mix it up a little bit. Steps, here's some tips for building a resource center based on our experience and what we found works best. Okay. So you need to identify an owner of this project. Typically, we work with a marketing director or marketing manager when we come in and support a company. So that's usually the person who owns it, which makes a lot of sense. They're usually the best positioned. But I just want to note that just because someone owns the initiative to build out better content on your website, it doesn't mean that they have to do all the writing and creating, right? There's a lot of ways, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. There are a lot of ways to gather those resources, a lot of different types of resources you have, but someone needs to own the initiative, and they need to be held accountable for doing it. Make sure when you're answering all the questions that I just went through, that you're talking to your customers. Don't plan or brainstorm in a vacuum. You need to understand their pain points, their real pain points. You need to understand what they value most. We love doing customer interviews because inevitably they will end up valuing or identifying something that the distributor or the other companies that we work for don't even realize that they value, or they might have a pain point that maybe where it wasn't highlighted internally. I believe that Mike is fond of saying sales reps don't always have the full picture, right, Mike? So you need to talk to the customers and get that insight, unfiltered, and that will help you create better, more relevant and valuable content for them. You need to make sure you're set up technology-wise. Not all websites have a built-in blog. So make sure that when you're creating plans to build a resource library, if you don't already have one or don't already have the functionality, that you need to figure out how to do that. And there are a lot of ways to do that. And it's actually pretty easy these days. There are a lot of templates and whatever, but you need to make sure that you have a plan for the tech side of things. You need to identify your experts. This would be internally, all your subject matter experts. If Fred's an expert in hydraulic hose selection, make sure you identify that, right? And create a spreadsheet of what everyone, what the areas that they're comfortable talking about and that they have experience in, or maybe they have great anecdotes you can leverage. You also need to identify outside resources. So your manufacturer partners are great. Or your manufacturer reps that you work with might be great resources. Identify content production resources. Okay, this is the part that's usually overwhelming to people. Okay, great, we want to create this library, but who the heck's going to write it? Who's going to post it? Like, we might get started, but after a few months, we're going to get distracted by fire over here, a fire over here. Oh my God, we have a trade show to prepare for. So you need to have a plan for who's going to do it and who can do it consistently. Outsource if you need to. Of course, that's what we do. I think it's obviously a very valid option, but you can also hire in-house. Either way, whether you're outsourcing or hiring someone in-house to help you build out the resource library, make sure you're finding the right fit. Just because a content agency says they can write blogs for you, it doesn't mean that it's the right fit for your company. Okay, so we actually have believe it or not, we have a blog on our website about, how to decide the best path for you, whether you outsource it or go in-house with content production. And it talks about the pros and cons of both, the things that you need to look for, the questions you need to ask potential agencies or potential contractors. So if you're interested in that, let me know, or go to our website. It's on our blog. Start small, prioritize what's going to have the greatest impact by persona, topic, content type, market. If you really are going head on and trying to grow the residential contractor market, for example, maybe focus just on that to start with. Okay, don't try to solve, don't try to, what's the word, solve global hunger, for example. Really focus in on small steps and build on that, especially if you are limited resources. And of course, build a content calendar. Please build a content calendar. A content calendar is your roadmap, and it's built based on your strategy to ensure that consistent production of the right content to get your team on the same page. You must have a calendar, and you must set deadlines and project manage your blog and your content on your website just as you would anything else. Before I jump into common mistakes, which will close out this conversation, does anyone have any questions? I don't see any questions in the chat, but I want to encourage you, if you do have questions, to throw those in there. Awesome. Okay, let's jump into common mistakes, and then that'll wrap it up. And then if you have any questions at the end, we'll open it up. All right, so big common mistake that companies make. And I will hammer this one home. What is the word? I will hammer this until the cows come home. Being too salesy. I'm sure you've heard me say this before on my LinkedIn. We say it in our blogs on our website. Your content needs to be about the customer. It does not need to be about you. Don't spend half of an article talking about how awesome your service is. The customer, the prospect doesn't want to hear that. An educational article, a webinar, that's not the place to do that. Provide content that's going to help them make the decision. Make it about the customer. Don't be salesy. Don't try to do too much too fast. A lot of people do that, and again, they burn out, and the result is a website with a blog where the last, post was a year ago because they just burned out. They couldn't do it, 2 blogs a month to start out with, if you have to. That's reasonable. Quality over quantity is a completely valid strategy. Don't expect overnight results. It's a long game. Don't assume what you know. Don't assume you know what your audience wants without talking to them. Again, talk to your customers. Talk to your customers. They will be very transparent with you on what they value and what their pain points are. Make sure, again, you have a plan, not only to produce the content, but to promote and distribute the content. Because if you it's like a tree in the forest, if it falls and no one's there to hear it, right? You post a blog to your website, you're not optimizing it for search, you're not sharing it with your sales team to share, you're not posting it to social, you're not using it in email marketing, you're not repurposing it with a video, then it's not going to have the legs that you're looking for it to have. Don't try to write everything yourself. This is one that's probably we often get people who experts in what they do. They know a lot about what they do, right? But they don't have the time to write a blog. Let's say one of your subject matter experts or even a marketing manager. They think, oh, I can write all of this. Chances are you probably can't. You're probably going to have to, again, put out fire here, put out a fire there. Or your subject matter expert's going to keep getting distracted by project after project because writing blog is not their priority. That's where finding actual content writers, maybe with journalism backgrounds, who know how to ask the right questions, can pull and download those experts' brains, can create content for those people. So there are ways to do it. I'm not going to go deep into it, but you don't need to write all the content yourself. Letting perfect be the enemy of good enough. Okay, so this sounds like I'm saying if it's just okay, just go with it. But if something, don't spend a lot of time finessing sentences or finessing words. Make sure that the content you're putting out is accurate, it's quality, it's not written poorly or anything like that. But also don't hold up content if it's ready to go. You can always update it later. Let's say, there's an update that's going to come in a few months for a product. Okay, fine, post what you have now, and in a few months, update it. That's the beauty of digital content. It's never static. You can always update it, you can always change it, you can always revise it. In fact, we strongly recommend that you do that on a regular basis. And the last item that I want to bring up when you're preparing and creating a resource library is making sure that you limit the number of people, for approvals to just those who absolutely have to approve it. For example, if you're a smaller company and your CEO is insisting on approving every single post that goes through the pipeline, that's going to be a bottleneck. So if you can figure out a way to make it so that, okay, the subject matter expert always reviews it, right? You want to make sure the technical details are correct. And an editor, a professional editor, or someone that knows how to write well, reviews it, then theoretically that should be enough, right? So limit the number of people that have to approve something to get it live. Your concern should be, is it accurate? Does it reflect your company's perspective, tone, etc.? It's not. And if it does, then get it live. Like, make sure that you're getting that content out there. Don't have 5 people in the row for approval. So those are the most common mistakes we see and what I recommend avoiding. I'll post those on LinkedIn later today if it's useful. Does anybody have, let's see here. I do have one question. How do I know where to start? So it's a good question. A lot of this, so the question is, where do we start? Like, how do I know where to start? So when we go through a content strategy session with our clients, we do this at the start of any engagement. We go through a content strategy session, multiple calls, where we're basically just digging into who the company is, what they do, who they serve, what those customers care about. We try to schedule customer calls so that, again, we can understand what they care about. They get another point of view. We look at their competitors. If you're starting from scratch, I feel like that's easier and it's exciting, and there's a clear pathway, clear runway for growth, and creating a wonderful library that you're going to be starting small and it's just going to be little drips. But I feel like that path it feels overwhelming, but I almost think it's clear. So what you're doing there is you're first creating an overall content strategy. Who are we serving? Who are our priorities? All of the questions that I just answered. And then you're homing in on what do you want to focus on first? What's the most important thing? And then build out a calendar from there, right? And I know that's not a great answer because it does feel really overwhelming. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and I've been doing this a long time. So for me, I'm thinking I can just see it right in my head, but that's not helpful for someone asking the question. But again, starting small and really doing that legwork and building that foundation at the beginning to understand what the goal is of what you're doing. So you're not just, throwing darts in the dark, is really going to help. Going through that process really brings you to a point where it's really obvious where you can start. So you're starting with those questions. You're starting with the big picture. What are you trying to accomplish? Who are you trying to target? What do they care about? And then you're building out the plan from there. Are there any other questions before we close out today? Oh, Mike Marks has raised his hand. Hey, Mark. Hi, Mike.
It's okay, kid. I know that you guys do more than 2 blogs a month for us, and the point you made about starting is, can you do too many? Can you do too much stuff? I mean, because I think it works better that there's more going on. I think they kind of reinforce, the blog events kind of reinforce, but how do you know too much? You're doing too much. I hate spam.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I think this one, just to make a point, there's a difference between, publishing a blog and distributing a blog. So to kind of clarify that, you could publish, we worked for a client earlier this year that we were doing 12 blogs a month. It was a larger organization. They had very distinct business divisions, right? And each of those divisions were targeting different customer bases. So it was almost like we had 3 different clients, right? Because we were building a content strategy and plan for each of those 3 areas. But we were publishing 12 a month. That said, they weren't promoting 12 a month, right? You can publish that content and it can serve a role on your website for people who are visiting your website and people who are visiting your website and people who are searching, right? Or sales reps who want to use one of those blogs, share with, one of their prospects. So there's a lot of use for that content on your website, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to blast out all 12 of those at once in the month of January, right? They're not going to necessarily push all of that out via email every time something new gets posted. So I think I just want to specify that. I think that you can post like 12 blogs a month if you want to. The key there is like, are you posting the blogs just to post blogs, right? Are you just writing things to write things? Or is there a reason for it, right? Every single one of those blogs serving a purpose? And do you have the resources to actually write those and write them well, so that they're serving the purpose that you intended them to serve? If you can do that, go for it. But I'm also a believer that that's really hard to sustain if you don't have the resources to do it. And the quality may go down as a result. So I always recommend quality over quantity. You could write a 2,500 word, in-depth, useful, engaging piece. And of course, somebody's probably going to ask, how long is too long? Write as long as you need to write, but most blogs usually fall under 2,000. But let's say you write a 2,500 word piece for your blog, but you only do 1 or 2 of those a month. And the goal is to go super deep on a topic. So for someone like Mike, who's a consultant who has, a lot of thought leadership up there in his brain, that might be a good strategy, right? And we don't usually write that long for him, but we could, right? We could go a deep guide to restructuring your Salesforce, and that could be 2,500 words. It could be a super useful piece from top to bottom. Do you need to do 12 of those a month? Probably not. One blog can drive, and I'm going to bring this up too, and then I'll stop because I have one other question I want to get to. One blog or 2 blogs or 3 blogs can drive most of the organic traffic for a website. So you don't need 12 blogs to drive great traffic to your site. You could have just a handful of really high quality, well-optimized content, and that can drive a ton of traffic to your website. And then those other blogs, they trickle in whatever, they serve other purposes, but you don't need 12 blogs to drive a lot of traffic to your site. You just need high quality content that's optimized and that's used wisely. I have a question from Jennifer. Do you have suggestions for software to manage content calendars other than an Excel spreadsheet? You're going to hate me, Jennifer, because we usually use Excel spreadsheets. So that's probably not a really very helpful response. But I'm going to take that question, Jennifer. I'm going to pose it to my team because it's entirely possible that there are some systems they've used out there in the past, or maybe are using with some of their clients that are worth sharing with you. We also use a lot of project management tools for managing the flow of content, which I didn't bring up. So we use Trello for all of our clients. Some of our clients use Asana, Rike, a few of those kind of common project management platforms, and you can adapt those to manage your content as well, your content flow, which I recommend. I recommend having a central place like that outside of an Excel spreadsheet to manage the flow of your content through your publishing pipeline. But let me get back to you, Jennifer, with a better, more in-depth answer. Are there okay, great. Are there any other questions before we close down today? And if you have other questions, you can always email me or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help in whatever way I can. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. This will be placed on YouTube, so you can share it with anybody you would like to share it with. If you found the content helpful, we will repurpose it, which I always recommend with content, into a blog for our own website. And you'll see some social out of it. Again, repurpose, repurpose, repurpose. And then we'll also be sharing it on our podcast, which we're getting relaunched. So you'll be able to access it there. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, visit our site, 3aspensmedia.com. We have a ton of content about everything I just talked about on there that goes more in depth. Thank you so much for joining me.